Zach is back with a Hulu original review. Today I'm reviewing Handmaid's Tale, and I know Handmaid's Tale isn't really relevant right now. It was relevant maybe, it was like a year ago. But hey, because of the pandemic, I have a lot of free time on my hands, so I decided to watch it. I heard a lot of great things about The Handmaid's Tale, and I was actually really excited to watch it. I watched it with my wife, we got it set up in the other room, and it's okay. It kind of reminds me of another show, and I'll get into that in a second. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the story. The Handmaid's Tale is based off of Margaret Atwood's novel, The Handmaid's Tale. The story is actually about worldwide infertility, and they never really explain why everyone's becoming infertile. It's kind of, they give you kind of like hints towards it. It could be pollution, it could be a disease, but they never really tell you specifically what it is, and I actually enjoy that because it gives more mystery to the show. Because 99% of the population can't actually have children, there is a mass panic. But during this time of extreme panic, fundamentalist extreme Christians like extreme panic? Back that up. Extreme fundamentalist Christians take over the government and take dictatorial rule over the United States. And because of that, women have little to no rights, and a lot of them are basically like slaves. And there's a particular group of women that are still sterile. They're still able to have children, and they are called the handmaids. And if you think the other women have it bad, the handmaids have it the worst. The handmaidens, they're basically sex slaves. They have no rights. The country or the government will dictate exactly who they're going to have sex with, when they're going to have sex with them, how many children they're going to produce. They're sex slaves. That's all I can say about that. It's awful. And if there's any back talk from these handmaidens, the government comes down on them like an iron fist. You know, they'll gouge out their eye, they'll cut off a finger, or they'll break their legs. They'll do all sorts of crazy, horrendous shit to these women if they get out of line at all. I understand the appeal to this show. There's actually some golden nuggets to be found. And both me and my wife agreed when we were watching the show. The way this totalitarian government maintains order, you know, through the ranks, it's pretty interesting. I really enjoyed that part of the show. The aesthetic appeal to the show is actually very interesting as well. It has this kind of old-timey feel where it has this kind of 1800s sort of look about certain people. And then there's also a weird look of almost 1950s suit and tie. But then there's high-level technology for the military. So it's this weird kind of, it's almost like they're in like a limbo kind of, where technology has advanced a lot further than it is now, but then again, how everyone's style and how houses are built looks very old-timey looking. It's just interesting. It's very cool just to look around at stuff and go, wow, that's kind of interesting. Look at that. The best way I can put it is this show has a feeling of if 1984 had a baby with the Salem witch trials, and that's what the style of the show looks like. Hands down, the best part of the show are the characters in this show. They all keep you invested. They all have their little quirks. They all have their objectives that isn't just let's make babies and let's survive this. And I like that. They all have their own little spunk to them, if that makes any sense. Yeah, all the characters in the show are damn interesting, and it keeps you invested in the show. That's what you need in good characters. If the show would have been about 2 seasons long, and they had a narrative that kind of just went from start to finish, they all had the story beats that you wanted, and then ended, this show could have been a masterpiece. I never read The Handmaid's Tale, so I'm not sure how the book kind of reverts into show. I don't know if it's completely different, if it's close to the same, you know, from the same literature. I have no clue. But I have to tell you, the writing in this show is a mess at some points. And they do some inexcusable fatal flaws when it comes to the writing. Horrible, horrible flaws. The Handmaid's Tale's biggest problem, and the one that from which so many others spring, is that the show seems terrified to move forwards with its plot. Period. And this particular issue is what I'd like to call the Walking Dead syndrome. For anyone who's watched The Walking Dead and has kind of gotten over that show, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. What is the Walking Dead syndrome, you ask? The Walking Dead syndrome is when there is particular story beats and they just rehash that shit over and over again until the end of the show, and it never breaks the story beat. For example, The Walking Dead has 3 story beats. There's the survival moment, right? That's where they're kind of walking out the woods trying to find a new location to kind of make home. So they're all looking around. That's usually where all the shit comes down, where there's zombies, they have to face them, they have to collect food, they have to get a car, they have to do all that crazy stuff. Then they finally, the second beat, is when they find a location to live at, right? They'll do that. They'll find a place to live. They settle down. That's usually where everything gets really boring. Something will happen. Something big will happen. And then, boom. This is the third story beat. Big thing happens. Their home gets destroyed for some reason. They have to go back out in the wilderness and then rehash that story beat all over again. And at first, you're like, okay, this is a pretty good show. I like this story beat. But then after like the third or fourth time you see it, you start thinking like, is this all the show's going to be about? Is it only going to be these 3 story beats over and over again, but rehashed with like a different sort of spice? And it just gets boring after a while. You can see what's going to happen before it happens, and it becomes really freaking predictable. And this show suffers immensely from it. And The Handmaid's Tale does the exact same thing. Every time a character is about to cross the finish line and get to their objective, something will just, boom, some ex machina will happen, stop them from what they're doing, and then everything will revert to the status quo like before. And it just does the rehashing of the same story beat over and over again until you're brain dead. It does that exactly like The Walking Dead, I swear to God. Another reason why The Handmaid's Tale kind of just shambles on to its conclusion is that there's a lot of plot padding. They just kind of have all this fluff in the show that doesn't even need to be there. In one sense, it's kind of okay that it has a little bit of padding, a little bit of drifting off from the main plot point. Yeah, sometimes we need a break from the repetitive story that it's telling. You know, June just being destroyed by the system over and over again, and try to show us something different. And that's okay. But sadly, the show hasn't really been great at telling these other little insignificant stories. For example, the show likes to cut to Canada a lot to show a particular character, but the character has almost zero to no impact on the story. So when they cut to them, I'm just sitting there going like, alright, start twiddling my thumbs. What are we here? What are we doing here? Please get back to the main plot. Like, I get that it's repetitive, but at least it's better than just sitting through this bullshit. And frankly, it just kind of feels like when they drop to Canada that they're just trying to pad out the runtime of the show, and it just, that's all it feels like. It just feels like wasting time for the sake of wasting time, and nobody likes that. So stop it. Stop doing that shit in shows. And about to get to the number 1 problem in the show, and I know I've been beating up on the show, but I'm doing this for your guys' sake. I don't want you guys just going through the same repetitive nonsense over and over again. And the main problem of the show, and this is kind of hard to say because some people supposedly like this character. The main character, June, is one of the most unlikable characters I've ever seen in a show, and it almost destroys this show. I'm not even joking. And it's not just me. It's not just my flavor and what I think about the show. My wife and her friends refer to June as the dumb bitch. And that's pretty harsh to be saying about a main character in a show, because the main character is someone that you're supposed to be rooting for when it comes to any sort of show that you're watching. Especially Handmaid's Tale, where it's about a dictatorial government taking over, oppressing these women. So you're really supposed to be rooting for her. But she's so goddamn unlikable that you just don't, which is horrifying. The fact that you're not rooting for someone being tortured is horrifying. One example, she has this aura of self-entitlement in this show where she just kind of snickers at everybody and kind of feels like she's almost like, I'm too good for you guys sort of deal, when she's in life or death situations, and it just doesn't make any sense when you're watching it, and it makes her look like an asshole. I'm not going to spoil anything in the show, but let's just say a lot of deaths happen because of her, and it doesn't seem like she really gives much of a shit about these particular deaths and the lives she is ruining because of her actions. There's a lot of instances where she acts like the big shot, and she has leverage on people, when she really doesn't. She has no leverage at all in some of these circumstances. She just has this kind of self-entitlement about her that just makes her look like she has leverage, and like, I'm going to tell you what to do, and you need to do this, and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, what leverage do you have? You are a slave in this place. What are you doing? You know what I mean? You gotta be like, you gotta be silent and sneaky about this shit. You can't just be blurting shit out and acting just flicking that wrist and, self-entitlement. She acts like that a lot in this show, and it doesn't make any sense. Another bad thing about June is that she has too much plot armor. And I understand that most main characters have a hint of plot armor to them, but she has an astronomical amount of plot armor, like a metric shit ton. It's crazy. I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's multiple instances in this show where the bad guys just kind of let her free and they let her live for no reason. And when I mean no reason because she royally pisses off some of the bad guys in this show. Some of the enemies in this show, she pisses them off to the brink of going mad, right? And she never gets punished for them like she should. I mean, people have gotten killed for less. So for her to just be pissing everyone off, especially the enemies, and her just not being instantly executed on the spot makes like little to no sense. It actually doesn't make any sense at all. I said little, it makes no sense. All the bad guys seem to be okay with just keeping her around. It makes no sense. That's all I can say. It makes no fucking sense. And I get it. This show wasn't made for me. It's not made for men. It's supposed to be made for women. I 100% get it. But there's certain elements about a narrative that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about gender. You just gotta look at it for what it is objectively. And this show fucks up a lot of stuff. It consistently messes up the plot. It just rehashes the same shit over and over again. June is just so goddamn unlikable. It's ridiculous. It's actually ridiculous. I don't know how they tried to make such an unlikable character likable, or at least make you try to root for her. But they fail on all parts when it comes to the main character. The only saving grace in this show is the interesting aesthetics. The world building is amazing in the show, and all the side characters are actually pretty interesting. So I like that. But the main character shit, the plot is shit. It rehashes the same stuff over and over again, and a lot of plot armor happens with the main character, and it's almost unexcusable how bad it is. And personally, for me, I just can't give it anything higher than a C-. It's below average for me. It was pretty interesting for like the first couple seasons. It was kind of keeping me interested. It was getting me going. But then after I saw them rehash things for like the second or third time, I was out of it. I was like, I've seen this show like this. It's The Walking Dead, but with handmaidens. That's all it is. It's The Walking Dead, but more women-oriented. That's all I can say about it. So yeah, I give this show a C-, and I'm confident in that rating. But thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, do all of that YouTube business. Definitely comment if you think I'm just messing shit up when it comes to this review. I know there's a lot of people who really, really like this show and are very fond of it. But personally for me, you got my review. I'm not going to say any more about it. But thank you guys so much for watching, and see ya!